Hey guys, Mechanite here, and today I'm going to be talking about a theoretical concept for a new MSM class, which I call the Messengers, and I'll talk about their origins and the lore behind them at the end of the episode, but for now all you need to know about their designs is each one is based off one of the 12 Olympian gods in Greek mythology, and also they're split into pairs who inspired the bodies of the quints. Also, each one was created by and for a specific one of the Celestials. So this first one is Rockatrice. Its Greek god inspiration is Ares, the Greek god of war, who is sometimes depicted having an animal such as a vulture. Their quint is Dromedary, and the Celestial who created them is Taut. And I wanted the island these all reside on, which I call Messenger Castle, to be kind of like Woodland Island or Ethereal Workshop, where it's kind of electronic and it has lots of sounds at once. Obviously that's hard to do with only 12 monsters, but this one is percussion, and you'll see it's kind of inspired by Taut and Dromedary, how they make their sounds, but it's with like weapons since it's Ares. And I imagine that this monster is also the first ever monster, the common ancestor of all the monsters in the Armour Clade, which is a monster family which includes both Repetillo and Strombonin. I really like how this design turned out. It has the messenger element and the earth element. Each one will have the messenger element plus the second one, which represents theirs. And I hope you all enjoy how this one came out as well. Since the Messengers are splits into groups of two, who both helped inspire the body of the same quint, I'm going to be grouping those together. So this is the other half of the monster who inspired the body for Dromedary, and you'll see that each of these have their elements correlating to the element of the Celestial who created them, and to the quint. However, if it's an ethereal element, then it'll be to the natural equivalent. Like, Earth is a natural equivalent of poison, which is this monster's element. And obviously, it's the monster of both Dromedary and of Skaratar, while also representing the Greek god Dionysus, who was the god of wine and, like, getting drunk, basically. So that made it a good fit for the poison element. I obviously wanted it to have an arthropod kind of design, since both Dromedary and Skaratar kind of have insectoid or crab-like appearances, but to change it up from those two, I made it more lobster-like. And I overall like how this one came out, and for its instrument, I imagine it being a vocal, but kind of an electronic vocal, almost similar to Bemoebeth. That was my main inspiration on the sound for this guy. Next up, the Cold Messenger, Accordiacopia. And I was always drawing these. Obviously, they're inspired by Greek gods who are, like, human-like, at least in appearance. But I worried that I was making them too human. So in the end, I ended up having a good balance because I kind of toned it down to the last ones I was designing. But this does end up being more humanoid. Not that I don't like that, I actually do like it a fair bit. And I knew this one in appearance wasn't going to be that similar to its Celestial Glacier and Quint Tusky, but I knew it would be in colour scheme, since those two monsters themselves have very similar colour schemes, and its Greek god equivalent is Demeter, who is the god of the harvest and agriculture. Obviously, the harvest is something that happens prior to the winter, hence the cold, so that you have enough food. So I obviously think it turns out very well. And as for the sound of the accordion, it's another one I think works with, like, the island, but this one being on kind of like Woodland Island, where it's very, like, loud and lots of musical elements at once. And it would make it with the kind of extra mouth that's on its stomach. Overall, I think this one turns out very well. I gave it, like, a bunch of plants on it and stuff. Demeter was another choice for the plant element messenger, since obviously plants, the harvest, fits very well. But I had another choice for that, and I think either way, I really like how this monster turned out. Our shadow element messenger is based on the Greek god Apollo, who is sometimes depicted with a lute, so that was an obvious choice for this monster's element. And this one was kind of hard, since for all of these, I want them to resemble the Celestials, but that's less important than the Quints. So, but in this one, the Celestial and the Quint were very different looking, so it was difficult. But I think the kind of connection I made to the Quint, how it has these two tentacles on its face, which could be repurposed to inspire Tuskies to, like, Trunks, I think is actually a pretty smart way of doing it. It's inspired by Cthulhu, which is another kind of godly inspiration I thought would be cool. Overall, this isn't one of my favourites, but I do have to say, you'll see for a lot of these, the reference image of the Greek god I have up is from the game Hades. I've never actually played that game, but if you like the art that you're seeing, go check it out, because I really like the art, and it's inspired a lot of my drawings recently. I just really like it, even if I've never actually played the game. Anyway, I kind of went on a tangent with this one. This isn't one of my favourites, I would say, but I do end up liking it. Overall, it does end up looking like a shadow element monster and everything that it's meant to look like. I do think that maybe the more bestial ones don't look enough like the Greek god they're meant to look like. That'll make more sense in the lore, how they're actually meant to look a bit closer. But I think in terms of variety with the designs, it was a good idea. Anyway, we're coming up to the finished product, so let's have a look at how this drawing turned out. Obviously, the 12 gods of Olympus aren't all going to have exact parallels in MSM monsters or elements or stuff, but this one actually did. Poseidon as the water element messenger is like just, it makes sense. There isn't any other one that would make as much sense with it. As the water element messenger, it obviously shares a connection to both Bowhead and Hornicle. However, for its sound, I actually took more inspiration from Bowhead, and with its design. Obviously, I wanted to make it a horse, since Poseidon is actually like the patron god of horses. I'm pretty sure also unicorns, so I gave this one like a trident unicorn horn. But for Bowhead, since it's very hard to make a horse look like a whale, I gave it the 6 arms, and I had the arms in kind of the same position, how they strum the violin, which is this monster's sound, by the way, and it's on another one of the hooves. Overall, I end up liking this. It don't look that much like a horse, but MSM has never done a horse monster before, so I didn't really have any idea, any reference to go off of for how it would look in his style. So I gave it this beard, since Poseidon is often shown with that, and also it kind of connects it to Hornicle a bit more. Same with the colours, which are more Hornicle than Bowhead. Overall, I end up liking this one. As the water element messenger, it's pretty standard, nothing that out there, but that's not a bad thing, and I think it ended up turning out well. Our next monster represents Hera, the Greek god of women, marriage, and childbirth. And obviously, those are all pretty hard things to convey in an MSM design, but she is also represented with her animal being the peacock, so that was the main basis for this design. And as a crystal messenger, she's related to both Syncopite and Bowhead, and Bowhead was very difficult to do here, I tell you. It barely even looks like them in the result, but, you know, at the end of the day, it's difficult, okay? Just let me have this one. I gave him these 2 tiny little arms, kind of represent Bowhead having multiple arms, but, you know. Anyway, as the crystal messenger, I actually think a peacock fits very well with the idea of crystals and things like that. So overall, I do actually think it turned out very well. And for the sound, it's a tambourine, which obviously makes sense of how they make it. And I gave him this little crystal on the head, which also connects him a bit more to Bowhead. In the end, they don't end up looking that much like him. And those of you who know your mythology knows that Hera is actually Queen of Gods, alongside the King of the Gods, Zeus. However, in this MSM version, the pantheon is a little bit different. And the king, or I suppose you could just say the leader of the messengers, is actually a bit different. And we'll have them coming up in a moment. Anyway, we're coming to the end of this design, so I hope you all like how it turned out. Our plant element messenger represents the Greek god Artemis, who is the god of the wild and the hunt, and she is often shown with the deer being her animal, but I tried out a few designs like that, even some maned wolf designs, but overall I just didn't like how it was turning out. And I wanted this group to be a bit more vague, since a lot of them were turning out either too humanoid or too much just like regular animals. And since it would be representing Nials and Blasum, who are both kind of just like plants, I feel like I could just do whatever with this one, and as long as it was a plant, it would resemble both of the monsters it has to be related to. For its sound, I decided on the trumpet, which is another one I think fits well with the song of the island, which I haven't made that song, but who knows, if this video gets popular enough, I might look into it. And I gave them all these creatures peering out. Obviously, I think in MSM they'd be a bit weirder. It's a good idea that I could have even gone with the critters from different islands. Obviously, different islands, because the messengers are kind of meant to travel the monster world. More of that in the lore section, but I kind of just went with regular animals, which doesn't make much sense. But at the same time, when we get to the lore, you'll see it kind of does. So, who knows, it's a toss-up. But I end up liking how it comes out. It's a lot more vague than the other ones in terms of its inspiration, but I did give it hooves to kind of represent how Artemis is often shown with, like, deers and stuff. But they are genuinely just a god of the wild and stuff, so I think this makes sense. Overall, this is probably my least favourite of the designs. Not that I don't like it, though. I do like how all of these turned out. This next monster, the part of them that I'm most proud about is their name, which is Paralament. It comes from a group of owls being called a parliament, paralyze, and lament, since it's kind of ghost-like, being the plasma element messenger. Obviously, to connect it closer to Nyal's was going to be a challenge, but I decided to give it kind of the same method of making it sound with all these, like, tentacle things on its face, and the kind of the same face shape. And since most of the Gabagul's family in My Singing Monsters, most of that monster family is plasma element monsters, I decided, kind of similar to the first one in the episode, since these monsters are so ancient, this would be the common ancestor of all the monsters in that family, which obviously gave me a good basis and a good jumping off point to go from. Their Greek god parallel is Athena, who is the god of wisdom and strategic warfare. And obviously that's a bit hard to convey, but who knows, maybe this monster actually helped found the Colosseum or something. I'm not sure, but they are shown with owls, so it does make sense. And overall, I think this is one of my favourites, the way that they make their sound, and overall, just the design in general. I really like it, and you'll get to see their rare version later in the video. Next up is Cyclotic, or Cyclotic. I haven't really decided, but the Greek god they represent is Hermes, which is the Greek messenger god and the god of, like, travel, I think, and speed. So I thought, since these are all messengers, it'll make more sense in the lore. I promise you'll just have to wait till the end of the video. Enjoy the designs for now. But as I was saying, it is like the Greek god of messengers. So I thought, as the messenger, it should be the leader of them. So it is, and it's the air element messenger. Its quint that it's helped inspire was Mimic. Obviously, that's just from its bird-like design, it makes sense. And obviously, it makes the same sound as its celestial Atmos. It's obviously an electric guitar. It doesn't actually have, like, kind of one on its physique. I mean, neither does Atmos, but that's for a different reason. But I imagine it kind of being Kruvlafti and Crocus in how it makes it sound. Overall, I really like this one. I went with definitely a more angelic kind of design, or something that looks a lot more godlike for the leader of the messengers. And I really like how it turned out. I don't really have much else to say about it. Obviously, I think it will play a big role in the song of this island, since it's meant to be very loud and electric. But also, since it's the leader, that makes sense thematically. And yeah, like I said, I don't really have much else to say about it. Let's have a look at the finished result. This is probably the weirdest choice, like the weirdest pairing of a Greek god and an MSM element in the video, but as these went on, they started making less and less sense, and I just had to worry about making the designs work, rather than the actual concepts themselves. This is Aphrodite, from tri, meaning free, like it's kind of a tripod with its 3 legs, and also Aphrodite, the Greek goddess of love, which obviously is kind of like almost the opposite of the mech element, but I think it turns out pretty well, even if it doesn't make that much sense. And it was hard to link to Mimic, but I think the 3 legs were probably enough to get that across. I took inspiration from Rebro with this one, since they make the same kind of sounds, like the percussion, almost like Vention. And overall, I like how this one turns out. This is another one which I draw a rare for at the end of the video while I'm explaining the lore. And I don't really have much else to say about it, since most of the actual inspirations and how the design links to Mimic was in Cyclotic. There's not much for this one. So, yeah, I like it, and let's have a look at how it turned out. Onto the Fire Messenger, Hephaestus, based on probably my favourite of the 12 gods of Olympus, Hephaestus, the god of the forge. And it's the monster that represents both Candelabra and Furnos. And I really like how this one turns out. This is another one of the more humanoid ones. And I made it both a vocal and an instrumentalist, since I think the forge on its stomach being kind of a mouth was a really cool idea. And since I wanted that idea to be kind of shown to the full potential, I thought that could also make sound. While it also makes a sound with this kind of sticky goo it has between its hands, which I imagine is actually the same substance, like the same candle substance Candelabra is made from. And I had the idea straight away for the ones that represent Candelabra, ones who inspired its physical form, to have one represent like the material and the other the kind of humanoid shape. So for this one, it's a material, even though it is a fair bit humanoid, just less feminine and more masculine. And its name comes from Hephaestus Forge, and also lethargic, since it's kind of rotund in its appearance. Overall, I like how it turned out. As the Fire Messenger, I think it really works. This is the one that made me kind of say, like, oh yeah, we need more beast-like designs for this one. Because I was kind of torn on the lore. Now that I think about it, it makes sense for them to be beast-like, but it also makes sense for them to be, like, more humanoid and closer resembling their Greek god counterparts. But oh well, I think overall in the lore, the part that takes the most priority is the beast-like nature. So I think that's what I ended up going with for most of these, and I really like it. However, I do like this one even more, and I kind of have the idea it makes it sound almost like Thwok, the Wublin, how it kind of like smashes its, like, the brick on its head into the kind of like candle goo, and that's what makes its kind of bass guitar sound. Kind of like Thwok, the Wublin. Coincidentally saved for last, we have the monster representing Zeus, and also the leader of the Celestials, Galvana, which I'm starting to think wasn't actually a coincidence, but I think I should talk about that in a different episode. Anyway, this is also representing Candelabra, and it's the same humanoid appearance with the one leg, and I really like it. It's obviously the electricity messenger, and the sound it makes is the electronic synth, kind of like Astropod from Wobbling Island. Only this one, it could actually say it's like kind of related, I don't know, but Galvana made it, so it's kind of on a technicality already a Wobbling. But anyway, since it's Zeus, obviously electricity was the most obvious choice. Besides the Poseidon choice, this one was the most obvious one in the video, and obviously it makes it sound electrically. But for the beard, which Zeus is often shown with like a big kind of bushy beard, and you all wanted it to be kind of like a storm cloud of electricity, and I knew this wasn't going to be the leader of the messengers, but I did know I still wanted it to look very powerful. So I gave it like these big forearms holding the electricity. And overall, I like how it turned out, though I do think I like some of the others more. However, I guess that just makes it a good thing that this isn't the leader, and the leader of the messengers is actually one I like a fair bit. You know, we're coming to the end of this drawing, and I think it's about time we talk about the lore behind this MSM class. Essentially, the messengers are special monsters made by the Celestials so that they were able to communicate with each other while far away. Each shares a messenger element along with an element that their celestial corresponds with. They all exist on Messenger Castle, an ancient landmark from the dawn of fire. They are all based on their element, but are also split into duos that were used as inspiration for the bodies of the natural quints by the Colossals. During the Cataclysm, they all channeled their great dimensional powers through the World Tree in order to escape by travelling into our own world, the human world. This inspired the myths of the Greek gods in our own world, and they were led by the air messenger Cyclotic in this task, before returning to the monster world in the modern day. Anyway, that's the lore for these guys. I hope you all enjoyed. I really like the idea of it, how whenever the Celestials were out like adventuring or exploring different parts of the monster world and universe, that they'd have these monsters to act as messengers between them. I think it's a really cool concept overall, and the idea for them inspiring the bodies of the natural quints is also cool. The only issue I see with it is some of the monsters are said to be directly created by the Colossals, others are said to be just like species, I guess, that evolved over time. So this would confirm that the quints were directly created by the Colossals from the bodies, well, not from the bodies, with inspiration from the bodies of the messengers, no less. But I think it makes sense, and overall, I think this lore is something I'm extremely proud of. Same with all the designs in this episode, and I hope you're excited to see more MSM episodes in the near future.